Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Let me establish from the outset that we all want stronger border security. The question is, what is the most efficacious way of getting us there, and not creating a solution that fills a political promise, but doesn't really achieve strong border security. So I want to just follow up on an issue brought up by the chairman earlier regarding border crossings. And look, I've long held that and have an interest in ensuring that we're making policy based on sound data and credible threats. So it is my understanding, and you've testified to some of this morning, that your department keeps accurate statistics of the number of apprehensions at the border. Is that correct?
Apologies, yes.
And these statistics are compiled annually by U.S. Customs and Border Protection and published publicly on its website. That's correct?
Yes, we actually compile them monthly and publish them, but yes.
And according to this report, so the number of apprehensions at the border in 2000 was 1.6 million. Does that sound right?
It was over 1 million, yes, sir.
Okay. And these statistics show that in 2018, the number of apprehensions had fallen to just under 400,000. That's a drop of 75%. Is that right?
Yes, sounds about right.
Okay, so I have a chart that I'd like to display that shows the change in apprehensions. So now I want to ask you about what the president had said about border apprehensions. While touring the South Texas border on January 10th, the president stated of the Border Patrol, there were never so many apprehensions ever in our history. So, Secretary Nielsen, what the president said was not accurate, was it?
I apologize, I don't know the full context of that. What I can tell you is we have encountered more family units per month than ever in history.
No, I just want to know what the president said, is it accurate or not?
I just don't know the context of his statement, sir. If he was talking about family units in a particular sector,
no, I'm talking about the number. We went from 1.6 million in 2000 apprehensions and 400,000 in 2018. The president said that there were never so many apprehensions at the border in our history up until now. Is that accurate? Was the president accurate?
Again, it depends on the context because it depends on the type of migrant, sir.
Okay, it's either the 400,000 figure is either accurate or it's not. If it's accurate, then the president was not accurate. Is that correct?
Again, we've had monumental high numbers in some areas of the border.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to get a yes or no.
Sir, I just don't know the context of his statement.
Okay.
So I'm trying to give you my most accurate testimony. What I can tell you is that in some places we have had record months of families. In some areas we have had record numbers of apprehensions.
Okay. Well,
the gentleman, I think he's asking for the total number, not a selected category.
The total number, we are on track for this year for 900,000 apprehensions at the border.
But that wasn't the question.
Okay.
Is the president misleading the American people? Is he accurate in what he's saying? It's the largest amount of detentions, or is it not, apprehensions at the border?
In some categories, we have had record-breaking apprehensions.
Okay. Well, the president's claim, in the way I read it, is misled the American people. It gave the public fundamentally flawed factual information on a key border question. Did you take any steps to correct the information when the president stated what he did?
We provide information that we gather from CBP and all of our components for that matter. We provide them as a matter of course to the White House, and we try to put those numbers in context.
Well, Madam Secretary, the reason I ask these questions is they really go directly to the heart of the rationale for the president's emergency declaration. The president has been telling the public that there's an emergency at the border. because crossings and apprehensions are at record high levels. But as you really have conceded yourself in the testimony, the facts are exactly the opposite when you're looking at the actual number. Apprehensions today are substantially smaller than they were 20 years ago. And so my time is expired, but it is inaccurate. It's deceitful, I believe, to be inflating numbers or making statements that are not accurate. The president is wrong.
Chairman, would you mind if I just responded briefly? What I would say, sir, if the larger question is about the emergency, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a very different situation. So it's not just the number. It's the abuse of the migrants along the way. It's the sexual abuse. It's the violence. It's the new phenomena that we see of large groups coming, which the system was not prepared to care for. Many of our facilities were made for maybe 100 people a day. We're seeing 1,800 family units in a given sector on a given day. So when you put all of the facts together, the problem is not just the vastly increasing numbers, and again, we jumped another 30% from last month, but it's the type of migrant that our system is not set up to protect. Originally, it was single adults from Mexico. Now it's mostly Central Americans, and the vast majority are vulnerable populations, which are families and children. All of that together is a crisis because the system is not built for that type of flow.
Well, Mr. Landsman, we'll follow up with some more direct information on that. And I would ask the Secretary if yes or no would be very helpful in some of the questions that you asked. And I think that's what Mr. Landsman was really trying to get to, not anything else. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Secretary. Welcome to this committee. I've been following the border probably longer than I care to. Back when I was U.S. Attorney, Western District of Texas, to 15 years on this committee, chairman of this committee. Hard to get a good solution. But I can tell you, at least as I see it, and I just want to get your understanding that the threat has changed. It used to be in the old days we had predominantly males crossing for work. Now we have more family units than ever crossing because the coyotes understand the legal loopholes that we talk about. And they now know how to exploit them. And they're making a heck of a lot of money off it in the process and putting children in harm's way up that dangerous journey as they go northbound. In fact, in February, I think the apprehensions were 76,000 immigrants that were apprehended at the border. Then you throw on the fentanyls, the meth labs, dangerous drugs coming into this kind of the human sex trafficking. I think it is a crisis. I think the president's correct in saying it's an emergency and that we need dire action now. I'm disappointed we didn't pass the Goodlatte-McCall bill last November. I think it would have solved a lot of these problems. But there were about every Democrat voted against it and 20 Republicans voted against it. That was a historic opportunity. And here we are talking about this problem when we know that the laws are the magnet that draw them into the United States of America. And until Congress acts, and I look at you and I feel not sorry, but it's not your fault. It's Congress that's failed to act to solve this problem. And until Congress acts to solve the problem, we're going to continue to have this constant problem on our border. I think the president's doing everything he can in a creative way as well to get security down there that I think is very important. But I want to also talk about root causes. You talk about the Northern Triangle. You spend a lot of time down there. I'm going down with put my Foreign Affairs hat on. The chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee and I are going down to Colombia, to Venezuela. You have 3 million migrants coming out of Venezuela into Colombia, and they're probably going to start heading up north. This is a humanitarian crisis at its worst. We're going down there, and we're also going to go to the Northern Triangle. Can you tell us the latest on the Central American Security Initiative and how we can stop these families from making, paying $6,000? You must be very desperate to say, here, Coyote, I'm going to give you $6,000 to take my child up north. Very desperate situation. What can we do to stop that desperation?
I would just, in the time that I have, let me just give you a couple examples, and I can also refer back to a question that Congressman Jackson Lee asked me. The number of unaccompanied children is part of the humanitarian crisis. These are children whose parents decided to send them alone on a very, very dangerous journey at the hands of, most often, smugglers and coyotes or traffickers into the United States. What we hear from the Northern Triangle governments, they have said this publicly, I am sure that they will tell you when you visit them, is they want their children back. Our laws uniquely allow us to send Mexican children back home after they have gone through a process and do not have a legal right to stay. But under the law, we cannot send children from other countries back, except for Mexico and Canada. So the Northern Triangle governments have said to us, they will say to you, please send us our children back. We want them reunited with our families and communities here. We don't want the smugglers to be able to convince parents to send their children on this perilous journey where they are absolutely victims of violence and abused. As you know, sir, very unfortunately, because of the increase in violence at ICE, when we have families with children, we have to give every girl a pregnancy test over 10. This is not a safe journey. So I ask again that we change the law, we treat all children the same, and we afford them the opportunity to go back home if they have no legal right to be in the United States. The other part of this that I think we need to do is we need to find a way to be able to keep families together. Families need to be able to be kept together, go through the process. If they have a legal right to stay, we will welcome them here. If they don't have a legal right to stay, the most humanitarian thing to do is to remove them efficiently and effectively. Both of those changes we need from Congress.